Reaching Rosebud Creek, General Crook aimed to catch the Native Americans off guard, but his plans were thwarted as his presence had already been discovered. A Cheyenne hunting party stumbled upon the Army's camp, and the sight astonished them. In their words, it seemed as if the whole earth were black with soldiers. They rushed back to their village near the Little Bighorn River to warn the Sioux and Cheyenne. As they approached the camp, their wolf howls signaled the alarm. The elders quickly convened and decided that Crazy Horse would lead the warriors in a battle, while the rest of the community remained at Little Bighorn. Preparing for combat, the warriors stripped down, painted their bodies and faces, and readied their weapons. Meanwhile, the women prepared the camp for a rapid evacuation if needed. That night, Crazy Horse led the warriors out, with Sitting Bull accompanying them to offer moral support, though he would not directly engage in the fight. The Great Sioux War of 1876, which included the battles of Rosebud and Little Bighorn, was triggered by George Armstrong Custer's discovery of gold in the Black Hills of South Dakota in 1874. This led to an influx of settlers into the region, despite the Black Hills being part of the Great Sioux Reservation under the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868, which prohibited settlement. A previous provision allowing Sioux and Cheyenne tribes to hunt off reservation caused frequent clashes between Native Americans and settlers. When attempts to purchase the Black Hills failed, the U.S. government ordered Generals Crook and Terry in January 1876 to forcefully relocate the free Sioux to their reservations, intensifying the conflict. Escalations in violence over the winter and spring of 1876 brought the Sioux and their Cheyenne allies together near the Little Bighorn River. They gathered to discuss the threat posed by U.S. forces and to plan their defense. This meeting coincided with a coordinated three-pronged offensive plan by the U.S. military for June. General Crook advanced northward from the Wyoming border. Colonel John Gibbon moved northeast along the Yellowstone River, and General Terry, with the 7th Cavalry Regiment under Colonel Custer, pushed westward. As Crook's forces reached Rosebud Creek, he hoped to launch a surprise attack, but his plan was foiled. A Cheyenne hunting party stumbled upon the Army camp and was struck by the sheer number of soldiers, later describing it as if the whole earth were black with soldiers. They quickly returned to the Sioux and Cheyenne village on the Little Bighorn River, signaling their arrival with wolf howls to raise the alarm. In response, the tribal elders determined that Crazy Horse would lead their warriors into battle, while the rest of the community stayed behind to defend the camp. The warriors stripped for combat, painting their bodies and faces in preparation for war, while the women prepared the camp for a swift evacuation if necessary. That night, Crazy Horse led the warriors out, joined by Sitting Bull, who provided moral support rather than engaging directly in the fight. By morning, an estimated 1,000 Sioux and Cheyenne warriors advanced to confront Crook's force of approximately 1,300 men. The stage was set for a critical clash in the unfolding Great Sioux War. The battle erupted roughly 8 to 10 miles north of Crook's camp when Sioux and Cheyenne warriors encountered Crow and Shoshone scouts allied with the Army. Vastly outnumbered, the Crow and Shoshone scouts fought a delaying action as they retreated, spreading the alarm to Crook's forces. Pursued by the Sioux and Cheyenne, the scouts managed to alert the Army just as warriors began appearing. On the northern ridges overlooking Crook's camp, the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors divided into 3 groups. 2 groups prepared to engage the Army head-on, while a third maneuvered eastward to flank the soldiers from the south. The northern group initiated the attack with scattered gunfire aimed at the Army camp before launching a fierce charge down the slopes. With the Army caught off guard, the Crow and Shoshone scouts re-entered the fray, engaging the warriors in intense native-on-native combat. This skirmish provided Crook with the critical time needed to organize a defensive strategy. Crook ordered his men to seize the high ground both north and south of Rosebud Creek. The Army advanced northward, pushing back the Sioux and Cheyenne, while simultaneously securing southern bluffs to guard against a flanking assault. Soldiers stationed on the southern bluffs successfully repelled an attack by the flanking native force. Meanwhile, others were tasked with protecting the Army's horses, ensuring the mobility of Crook's forces. In the north, dismounted soldiers formed a skirmish line and advanced toward the Sioux and Cheyenne. However, the warriors retreated to higher ground, forcing the army to advance cautiously under persistent flanking fire from the northeast. The high ground advantage of the Sioux and Cheyenne significantly slowed the army's progress, setting the stage for a prolonged and grueling engagement. During the army's advance, an event unfolded that would forever define the battle for the Cheyenne. A Cheyenne warrior named Comes in Sight was fleeing on foot after his horse had been shot. In a heroic act, his sister, Buffalo Calf Road Woman, rode to his rescue. Comes in Sight leaped onto her horse, and together they escaped safely. In Cheyenne tradition, this battle became known as the battle where the girl saved her brother. As the battle raged, the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors employed unique tactics to outmaneuver the soldiers. Charging toward the army lines, they would hang with one arm around their horse's neck and fire or lance from beneath its neck, making them difficult targets. Between charges, they kept up a relentless barrage of gunfire from a distance and attacked in small groups. When counterattacked, they would swiftly retreat, using their superior mobility to frustrate the soldiers. General Crook quickly realized that his direct charges were proving ineffective. On the northeast front, Sioux and Cheyenne fire halted the advancing line, which included Crow and Shoshone reinforcements. Both sides continued skirmishing from cover, resulting in a fierce and drawn-out engagement. Meanwhile, on the northwest flank, the army advanced, forcing the Sioux and Cheyenne into a tactical retreat. Unbeknownst to the soldiers, this was a trap designed to lure them deeper into vulnerable territory. The troops found themselves isolated, about a mile from Crook's main camp and separated by the Colmar Creek Valley. In the center, the army pushed northward and successfully seized Conical Hill, a strategic position they would hold for the remainder of the battle. Around 11 a.m., Crook mistakenly concluded that a native village was located just north of his position due to the fierce resistance from the Sioux and Cheyenne. Acting on this assumption, he ordered the northeast segment of his forces to withdraw from the high ground on Crook's Hill and shift eastward to follow the Rosebud Creek north in search of the suspected village. At the same time, he recalled troops from the south side of Rosebud Creek to reinforce his position on Crook's Hill. This maneuver left a portion of Crook's forces on the northwest exposed. Recognizing the opportunity, the Sioux and Cheyenne concentrated their attacks on these isolated troops, surrounding and harassing them from three sides. The coordinated assault showcased the natives' tactical ingenuity and their determination to resist. Around 200 soldiers held their ground for about an hour, enduring intense fire from three directions as they exchanged volleys with the Sioux and Cheyenne. Fearing that this group might be cut off, Crook ordered them to withdraw to Crook's Hill. However, only about a fifth of the soldiers managed to pull back and link up with the main force, reporting later that the rest had been too engaged to retreat. Meanwhile, the Sioux and Cheyenne intensified their attacks on the northwest position, prompting the remaining soldiers to withdraw southeast along the ridgeline. Despite repeated assaults by the Sioux and Cheyenne, the soldiers held firm. A decisive moment came when a large group of Sioux and Cheyenne warriors charged boldly down the Colmar Creek Valley, targeting the retreating northwest contingent. Close range and hand-to-hand combat ensued, nearly overwhelming the soldiers, who began to panic. At this critical juncture, Crow and Shoshone scouts launched a countercharge, managing to push the Sioux and Cheyenne back and stabilizing the situation. To support the embattled northwest position, Crook dispatched reinforcements to occupy a nearby hill. These reinforcements, armed with long-range rifles, provided crucial covering fire. Recognizing the superior range of the reinforcements' rifles compared to the carbines carried by most soldiers, the Sioux and Cheyenne refrained from mounting a serious attack on the hill. The northwest soldiers continued their retreat, eventually establishing a new defensive position under heavy fire. From his headquarters, Crook issued orders to the northeast contingent, instructing them to turn back west and strike the rear of the Sioux and Cheyenne forces. He hoped this maneuver would relieve pressure on the northwest position. At the same time, Crow and Shoshone scouts moved southward to secure the army's flank. When the Sioux and Cheyenne saw the returning northeast forces, now exhausted from prolonged fighting, they chose to disengage. Turning north, they began to withdraw from the battlefield. The army briefly pursued them, but abandoned the chase. After 6 grueling hours, the Battle of the Rosebud came to an end, marking a significant engagement in the Great Sioux War. The aftermath of the Battle of the Rosebud saw significant losses on both sides. The army, along with their Crow and Shoshone allies, suffered 31 killed and 60 wounded. Crazy Horse later reported that the Sioux and Cheyenne had 36 killed and 63 wounded. Despite holding their ground during the battle, Crook's forces were unable to continue their march northward to link up with Custer, as originally planned. Instead, they retreated south to their camp at Goose Creek, near present-day Sheridan, Wyoming. There, they remained for the next 7 weeks, awaiting reinforcements. Following the battle, the Shoshone and Crow allies departed from Crook's command. Just 8 days later, many of the same Sioux and Cheyenne warriors who had fought at Rosebud achieved a decisive victory over Custer at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. For more details on that historic confrontation, you can watch my video. Click the link at the top right.